They came up the stairwell, and my papers felt too thin in my hands. I had bread on the table and a coat hidden under a mattress, as if hunger could pass for innocence. The orders made us legible, and the raids made legibility dangerous. I learned to cut a loaf into warnings and to live on what I did not eat. When the knock came, I was already gone. October 1942. Northern France, the industrial districts around Lille and Roubaix. German military occupation is in its third year. Food is rationed by coupons and identity papers. Police checks are routine. Raids for labour and arrests are a regular feature of the street. For civilians, survival is administrative. It is queues, stamps, permits, and the daily calculation of risk. In this environment, bread is not only food, it is a unit of exchange. It is measurable, divisible, and always in demand. It is also watched, because bread begins with a card, and a card begins with a name can be pulled from a pocket during a stop. The occupation authorities require registrations and declarations. Municipal offices keep lists. The prefecture circulates orders. The German command relies on French administration to enforce rationing, curfews, and labourer requisitions. Civilians are told that compliance ensures order. Civilians learn that compliance simply makes them legible. The woman at the centre of this story is recorded only in fragments. Like most, she leaves no official autobiography. Her presence survives in a trail that resembles many others. A ration card issued and renewed, a family booklet updated, a school note about absences, a landlord's complaint about late rent, and a police entry that lists identity verified and nothing else, and in the background the testimony of neighbours after the war, describing how people lived. She is a mother of two. Her husband was taken in 1940 during the collapse and the retreat. He is a prisoner of war in Germany. The family receives occasional postcards. They arrive late, stamped and censored. They carry a few lines about health and work. They never describe hunger in detail. Letters are not the place for it. She lives in a small apartment, one room heated when fuel is available. The building's stairwell smells of coal dust, damp clothes, and a cabbage. In the courtyard, people speak quietly. Not from loyalty, but from caution. Every building has someone who talks too freely. Every block has someone who listens. Her routine is built around two clocks. And one is the school bell, the other is the bakery opening. Everything else fits between them. In the mornings she leaves before first light in winter. She carries a cloth bag, a tin for dripping, and a bundle of coupons folded into paper. She checks pockets for documents, identity card, ration card, work paper if she has it, a note explaining where she is going, sometimes stamped, sometimes not. These pieces of paper do not guarantee safety. They only reduce the number of questions. The bakery line begins early. Women and older men make up the visible part of it. They talk about flour quality and the last delivery. They know which baker gives full weight and which shaves grams. They can recite prices as if they were scripture. They watch the door, because a line is also at an exposed place and the street is no longer neutral ground. Said ration bread exists, but it is not abundant. Weight and composition change. Sometimes it is darker, mixed with substitutes. Sometimes it turns stale quickly, sometimes it is cut thin in the hope that it will last. Children learn to chew slowly. Adults learn not to eat while serving. They wait until the children are distracted, then take what is left. The mother receives her allotment, then returns home. She breaks the loaf into portions, one slice for a child's morning, another for later. A small piece kept aside, wrapped carefully, not eaten, saved. That piece is not sentiment, it is currency. A loaf can be traded in ways that coins cannot. Coins can be demanded, counted, and taxed. Bread is immediate. Bread is believable. Bread does not look like profit, it looks like need. And in occupation, your need can pass through doors that money cannot open. She learns this gradually. At first, she trades only within the building. A neighbour has a small reserve of coal. In exchange for bread, the neighbour offers a few lumps, enough to warm water for washing, enough to keep a child from shivering through homework. Later she trades with the concierge. The concierge knows who is in debt, who has extra, who is missing. The concierge also knows who is being watched. A loaf handed quietly becomes information returned quietly. Not explicit warnings, just a change in tone. A hint that they were asking questions downstairs. A suggestion to stay in today. The mother does not speak in slogans. She does not talk about politics in the stairwell. Her attention is on practical limits, how long soup can stretch, And how far shoes can go before souls split. How to keep children in school without drawing attention. By late 1942, the operational problem for her household is not a single catastrophe. It is accumulation. Rationing is steady pressure. Fuel shortages tighten winter. School meals shrink. Illness spreads in crowded rooms. And, most dangerous of all, control intensifies. German authorities increase labour demands. Factories in the region are integrated into the German war economy. French workers are required, coerced, or pressured into service. Men are targeted first, then younger workers, then anyone who can be classified as available. On certain days, police and gendarmes conduct sweeps near train stations and factories. They check papers and pull people aside. They create lists. The mother's children are still too young for labour drafts. But her survival depends on others who are not. A cousin, a brother-in-law, a neighbour's son. If they're taken, households collapse. More mouths move into fewer rooms. More hunger concentrates in tighter spaces. The mother understands that raids do not stop at the person seized. They echo outward. She also understands that raids have patterns. They increase after new orders. They follow the arrival of German units. They cluster near transportation routes. They are heavier after acts of sabotage. When authorities respond by tightening control, she learns to watch the city like a weather system. Posters on walls are forecasts. Sudden silence in the street is another. Early signs of failure appear in her own routines. A baker refuses to honour a coupon without an additional stamp. And a clerk at a municipal office says she must return next week, then the next. The school sends a note about unpaid fees for materials. Her child's shoes begin to leak. Her hands crack from cold water and harsh soap. These are not dramatic moments. They are the slow erosion of options. By early 1943, the black market is not a shadow economy. It is a second ration system, with its own prices and risks. People call it by different names, but everyone understands its function. It is how you obtain what coupons cannot provide. Meat, butter, eggs, soap, sometimes medicine, sometimes extra flour. But the black market is also policed. German authorities and French police conduct inspections. They search baskets. They check for goods without receipts. They use informers. They arrest sellers and buyers. When they seize food, they make examples. In some cases, penalties include prison, fines, or internment. The line between illegal trade and threat to order is intentionally thin. For the mother, the question is never whether the black market is moral. It is whether her children can remain upright. She approaches it the way many do, cautiously, through introduction, through small quantities, with bread as a bridge. Bread has a special role because it is both rationed and universal. It can be used to settle a small obligation without leaving a trace in cash. A slice can be handed in a hallway. A half loaf can be traded for a bar of soap. A full loaf can buy something more valuable: discretion. This is how she meets the woman who sells second-hand clothing. Not in a shop window, in a back room, through someone's cousin. The clothing seller does not ask questions. She measures quickly. She checks for lice. She wants payment in food, bread, and if possible, a little fat. The mother trades bread for a wool sweater cut down for a child. The sweater smells of another household's smoke. It is worn, but it is warm. The mother learns to carry bread in a way that looks ordinary, wrapped in paper, tucked beside school notebooks, not displayed, not excessive, just enough to be plausible. She also learns that bread can buy time. A street patrol stops her once outside a tram stop. The gendarme asks where she is going. She answers with the calm of someone who rehearses. To the bakery, to school, to a laundry job. She offers papers without fumbling. Fumbling draws attention. While he checks her card, she keeps her eyes on his face, not his weapon. Her children stand close, trained to stay quiet. Yet the gendarme hands papers back. He does not smile. He simply waves her on. She does not run. Running is a confession. In 1943, the raids become more personal for her. Not because she is singled out, but because the city is smaller than it appears. A neighbour disappears after a sweep near the factory gates. A cousin is ordered to report for labour service. A young man in the stairwell starts sleeping elsewhere. People begin to rotate beds. A mattress becomes shared property. Someone is always hidden behind a curtain. Someone is always listening for boots. Official doctrine, in posters and announcements, claims that labour service is necessary and organised. It presents the drafts as lawful, scheduled and fair. People see a different reality. Men seized on streets, workers detained during document checks, families searching offices for information and receiving none, The doctrine promises order. The lived experience is confusion and fear managed by routine. The mother's adjustments are small at first. She changes routes. She avoids main squares on days when her patrols are heavy. She learns which streets have windows where a neighbour watches. A curtain moved slightly can be a signal. A bucket placed outside a door can mean not safe. These are informal systems. They are not coordinated by a single organisation. They are made of habit and necessity. They also break easily when someone is arrested or forced to move. Her trades become more targeted. Bread for coal is not enough anymore. Coal warms, but it does not prevent a knock at the door. The most dangerous threat is the raid itself. A raid does not only seize men for labour. It can also take hostages, it can detain people for lacking papers, it can capture those hiding, it can sweep up families connected to someone suspected of resistance. And in certain cases, it can be part of the larger machinery of persecution that ends in internment and deportation. The mother is not a political organiser, but she lives in a country where persecution is bureaucratic. Lists are made, stars are required in some places, registrations are demanded, rumours of arrests travel faster than official news. People learn to read the city's signals. A sudden closure, a blocked street, a bus route altered. These are not random, they are operational signs. She begins to trade bread for information, not gossip, practical warnings, which office is checking papers aggressively this week, which neighbourhood is being searched, at which day the police have been told to be active. This information comes from a few kinds of people: clerks who handle forms and hear instructions, railway workers who see movements, concierges who observe comings and goings, shopkeepers who serve officials and hear talk. None of them are omniscient. All of them are vulnerable. A wrong word can ruin a household. So information is given indirectly, often in exchange for something edible. Bread becomes the mother's stable offering because it is what she can control. She cannot print a permit. She cannot change a list at the prefecture. She cannot stop a patrol. But she can set aside a portion of the day's ration. She can reduce her own share. She can turn hunger into a bargaining tool. As spring turns to summer 1943, pressure rises. The city's factories remain busy. And transport is strained. Allied air raids strike industrial targets across occupied Europe. Sirens become part of daily life. People shelter in basements and stairwells. Afterward, they emerge into broken glass and dust. Bombing does not end hunger. Sometimes it intensifies it by disrupting supplies. For civilians, survival is now threatened from two directions: occupation control on the ground, war destruction from the air. Both are impersonal, both forced choices. The mother keeps her children close during alerts. In shelters, people whisper. They count explosions like seconds. When the all-clear sounds, the mother returns to the surface and resumes the work of finding food. The next day's breadline still forms, even when streets are cratered, even when a shopfront is missing. This is how civilian life persists, by repeating necessary actions until they become automatic. But strain shows, children lose weight, adults become irritable from exhaustion. Small illnesses linger. People barter heirlooms. A wedding ring can buy a sack of potatoes. A family clock can buy a little fat. Bread remains the currency for smaller exchanges and for urgent ones. In late 1943, the turning point begins, quietly. It is not a single event. It is the mother's realization that her usual compliance is no longer protective. She has kept papers in order. She has stayed within ration rules when possible. She has avoided attention. Yet raids continue. Controls become stricter. The space for legal living narrows. She hears that a sweep is planned near a tram junction used by workers. Yet there's the warning comes from a man who unloads deliveries at a municipal storehouse. He has heard it second-hand, and he is careful. He does not give names. He says only that tomorrow will be difficult. In exchange, he accepts bread. Not because he's greedy, because he's also feeding someone. Bread is the language they share without speaking too much. The mother adjusts her day. She keeps the children home from school with a plausible excuse. A cough, a stomach upset, nothing dramatic. She avoids the junction. She sends a message through a neighbour to a cousin who works nearby. Do not take the usual tram. The message is brief, almost banal, but it changes his route. The next day the sweep occurs. People are stopped, papers are checked, some are detained. Women stand aside with baskets watching, pretending not to watch. And it is not a scene of cinematic violence. It is administrative coercion. A line forms where no one intended one. A police whistle, a truck waiting, a few men pushed into it. The street resumes. The space where it happened looks normal within an hour. But households feel the absence for months. This is when the mother makes an unofficial decision. She will no longer treat her bread portion as only food, she will treat it as a tool to shape the environment around her children. Not to control the war, but to survive its procedures. Her trades become more deliberate. She seeks contact with a baker's assistant who sometimes has crumbs of extra flour. The assistant is young and wants to help his own family. He will not risk large theft. But he can occasionally add weight to a loaf or hold one aside if a delivery is late. In exchange, the mother provides not cash, but the kind of food that can be eaten immediately without cooking. Bread. Sometimes a small piece of cheese if she can obtain it. She also begins to barter bread for services. A cobbler can patch shoes. He demands payment in food because food is more reliable than francs under shortage. A seamstress can alter a coat. She accepts bread and a little soap. These trades keep her children clothed and moving. But they also build a network. A cobbler hears who was taken. A seamstress hears which streets are dangerous. A baker hears which officials demand bribes. Information passes through hands that never meet. Risk becomes personal in a new way when the mother is nearly caught in the middle of a building search. In many places under occupation, searches are conducted for multiple reasons. To find hidden men avoiding labour service, to locate stolen goods, to enforce curfew violations, to look for radio sets, weapons, or printed material. Sometimes to intimidate, sometimes to meet quotas. One afternoon the building's courtyard fills with unfamiliar boots. A neighbour's child sees them first and runs upstairs. The concierge's face changes. Doors close softly. Behind curtains, people stop breathing. The mother has no weapons, no radio, no printed leaflets, but she has something that can still draw punishment. Extra coupons that do not match her household count. A few items obtained through barter without receipts. And, more dangerous, a cousin's coat hanging on a hook, left there because he has been sleeping elsewhere. A coat suggests a person. A person suggests questions. She moves quickly without panicking. Panic makes noise. She puts the coat under a mattress. She hides the extra coupons inside a child's schoolbook cover. She places a loaf on the table, cut in half, as if they were about to eat. This is not deception for vanity. It is an attempt to look like a household that is simply hungry and ordinary. The search begins downstairs. Men's voices carry up the stairwell. Questions, answers, a cupboard opened, a chair dragged. When they reach her door, she opens it before they knock twice. This is a calculated move. A door opened voluntarily suggests innocence. She holds her papers ready. Her children stand behind her, quiet, trained. The officials look at the room, they look at the table, they look at the loaf. One asks where her husband is. She answers with the familiar line, prisoner of war. She shows the postcard, worn from handling. The official glances at it, then returns it. They search quickly. A cupboard, a drawer, a bed corner lifted. They do not find the coat. Not because she is cleverer than the system, but because searches vary. Sometimes they are thorough. Sometimes they are hurried. Sometimes the searchers are looking for a specific item and ignore others. Sometimes they are tired. Civilian survival often depends on this inconsistency. After they leave, the mother does not collapse. She makes soup. She keeps the children occupied. She restores the room to normal. Because the next danger can arrive without warning. Consequences begin to accumulate from her increased trading. The more she relies on informal exchange, the more she depends on people who can be arrested. One day the seamstress does not open her door. Another day the cobbler is gone. That the bakery assistant looks frightened and says nothing. A network can shrink overnight. At the same time, authorities push back against the very methods that keep civilians alive. Police inspections at markets increase. Controls on travel between towns tighten. Some people are stopped for carrying food. Baskets become suspicious. A woman with too much bread is assumed to be selling it. A woman with too little bread is assumed to be hiding someone. Either way, she can be questioned. The mother adapts again. She separates goods. She carries a small portion openly and hides another portion under laundry. She avoids travelling on days when rumours of checks are strong. She times her movements around school hours when mothers on the street look routine. Routine becomes camouflage. In early 1944, the stakes rise quietly but sharply. There is increased military activity. German units move through the region. Resistance actions and sabotage provoke reprisals and tighter control. Allied bombing continues to hit transport and industry. Civilian movement becomes more dangerous, not less. The mother's goal narrows to a few essentials. Keep the children fed enough to avoid sickness. Keep them out of attention. Avoid any interaction with authority that could lead to deeper scrutiny. Maintain the minimum paperwork required to exist. Bread remains the key, not because it is abundant, but because it is the one commodity that can be planned. She knows when coupons renew, she knows when deliveries are likely, she knows which baker can be persuaded with a small trade. She knows how to save crumbs and reconstitute them in soup, and in this period, she makes one of her most consequential trades. A clerk at a local office, a man who handles stamps and forms, is willing to do something risky. Not for ideology, but for food, and because he has his own fears. He can sometimes misplace a notice. He can sometimes delay a summons. He cannot erase a name, but he can slow the machinery. In an occupation regime built on paperwork, delay is life. The mother brings him bread. Not a full loaf at once, which would look like payment, small portions over time, a piece wrapped in paper, a few slices in a cloth. The clerk does not speak openly. He uses vague language. He suggests that a certain family should not be at home on a certain morning. He suggests that a door should remain locked and a light should remain off. This is not a cinematic conspiracy, it is a civilian workaround. And a person inside a system bending it slightly because he is hungry and because he knows the system is not moral. The mother uses this information. She prepares the children. She tells them they will visit someone. She does not say raid. Children repeat words. She packs a small bag with essentials, a scarf, a cup, a piece of soap, some bread, a few papers. On the morning indicated, they are not at home. They are in a relative's apartment, crowded but safer for that day. From a window, she later sees a vehicle stop near her building. Men enter. They remain for an hour. They leave. No shots, no shouting that carries through the street. Just presence, just inspection, just the possibility of capture. When she returns later, the concierge speaks without speaking. A look, a brief nod, nothing more. The building has been searched again. And someone else has been taken, a young man, a neighbour's nephew. A household will now stretch soup thinner. This is how the stakes peak in civilian life, not in a single heroic moment. In the quiet fact that the mother's small unofficial trade of bread for warning has prevented her children from being present at a door when the knock came. The avoidance is not glorious. It is simply survival. The consequences also include guilt. Not melodramatic guilt, but the practical heaviness of living when others are seized. The mother does not make speeches about it. She does not have the luxury. But she carries the awareness that her network helps some and not others. Civilian survival under occupation is uneven. It depends on timing, contacts, paperwork, and luck. As mid-1944 approaches, the soundscape changes. More aircraft. Her more distant detonations. Rumours intensify. People talk about landing somewhere, but details are uncertain. Announcements are vague or propagandistic. The German command insists on control. Resistance groups become more active. Reprisals remain a threat. The mother continues her routine because routine is stabilizing. Breadline, school, laundry work, trades in doorways, small payments made in slices. She keeps bread portioned as carefully as ever. Not because she believes bread is safe, but because it remains the most dependable unit she has. Then the occupation begins to loosen in uneven ways. Not immediately, not cleanly, but gradually through signs. Some patrols are less frequent. Some officials seem more nervous. Transport disruptions become constant. The city becomes a place of movement and uncertainty. Liberation, but where it comes, does not instantly restore supply. Food shortages persist. Infrastructure is damaged. Administrative offices struggle. Some collaborators are arrested. Some disappear, some are denounced. Some are quietly reintegrated. For civilians, the shift from occupation to aftermath is another kind of instability. The paperwork changes, but the need remains. In the weeks following liberation in many northern towns, rationing continues. Bread is still controlled. Queues remain. Civilians still barter. The currency of the street does not transform overnight because flags change. A system built on scarcity cannot be undone in a day. The mother's husband may or may not return quickly. Many prisoners of war come back late after processing and transport. Some return thin and silent, some do not return at all. In the meantime, she continues to run the household, she continues to trade what she can. But the nature of risk changes. The risk is no longer a raid for labour on a street corner. It is illness after years of shortage. It is housing instability. It is the slow work of rebuilding life in a city with damaged supply lines. Institutional responses after the war rarely capture the details of women's daily survival. Official histories record armies, leaders, and operations. Administrative archives preserve orders, arrests, and requisitions. But the quiet exchanges that kept children alive often remain invisible. A loaf traded for coal does not appear in a report. A slice offered for a warning is not filed in a cabinet. A mother's habit of portioning bread into currency is not listed in a liberation proclamation. Yet this practice shaped outcomes at the smallest level. It determined who remained warm enough to avoid pneumonia, who had shoes that held together long enough to keep attending school, who avoided a street on a morning when a truck waited, who stayed inside when doors were being opened. Bread became currency because the occupation turned civilian life into controlled scarcity. When institutions ration survival, people ration trust. When authorities raid households, neighbours develop signals. When official doctrine promises order, lived reality teaches improvisation. For the mother, the legacy is not a medal. It is children who reach the end of the war alive. It is a household that remains intact enough to receive a returning husband, if he returns. It is a memory carried in habits, saving crumbs, keeping papers dry, and listening to the stairwell and understanding how quickly normal can be disrupted. After the war, she may not speak much about the trades. Many do not because they are ashamed, but because the language of survival is hard to translate into peacetime. Bread returns to being bread, slowly. But for years she cannot look at a loaf without remembering its other meaning. A measure of safety, a signal, a bargaining chip, a small weight in the hand that could change the shape of a day. If you want more documented stories of civilian survival under occupation and the quiet systems that kept people alive, subscribe for the next episode.